This is Carin with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for Avoid the Maze. And for those of you who have tuned in before, or even if it's your first time, Avoid the Maze is a life that we all share. We wake up every morning, we think we know where we're going that day. And just like when I woke up today, my husband just told me while I was grabbing a cup of coffee to do the podcast, he said, you know, we have to go to Erie, PA later today. And I just looked at him and he said, yeah, we're going to make it happen. That was not on my calendar. But, you know, life happens. And today I have on, you know, Carin, I'm almost going to say you're my younger clone, because as I read your bio, there were so many things that you've been through in your life that I've experienced myself. And it is scary because I'm sure when those things were happening to you, like they were for me, your first thought is, why me? I'm the only one in the world who has to suffer. So for everybody out there, my guest today is Carin Rockland, known as the Purpose Girl. So I'm going to ask you to explain that before we go any further. Purpose Girl, explain.
Yeah, Purpose Girl. I fundamentally believe that every single one of us was born for purpose. And most people want to know what their purpose is, and most of us don't, right? It's like this big existential question, and it plagued me for years. Like, who am I? Why am I here? Not having a sense of it. And I had this deep sense that if we were living our purpose, which I'm so happy to get into what it truly is, which is actively making an impact in the world, using our talents, using our gifts, shining so brightly, being like that radiant, being our whole, full, authentic selves. Even if you don't do anything, like that being is purposeful.
Oh, absolutely.
But most of us, right? It's like it's beaten out of us from the time that we're young because we were too much. Then we think that we're not enough. And we learn from the world that all these things about us are not okay. And so I realized that I was put on earth to encourage, empower, light women up to know, and I know it's not all women listening to this, but to know what their purpose is and to go for it. And my journey to get there is a different story. I couldn't figure it out at first, so we can talk about that. And then once I figured it out, I was too scared to go for it. But so now what I get to do with Purpose Girl is I also have a podcast all about women's happiness. And because I believe that the ticket to women's happiness is being free, being alive, living our truth, living our purpose. And I coach women all over the world to take women on retreats. Italy's coming up, Miami's coming up, as well as get to lead a community of over 5,000 women all around this topic. So whether it's coaching individuals, coaching groups, doing classes, all around figuring out like, who are you? What are you really here for? And let's go do the damn thing. Right. My vision is that there will be an army of goddesses on purpose that are changing the world.
Well, and you know what I find interesting is that there is no time level that says it's too late. And a lot of us think that as we're growing up, if I don't define myself today, then I'm going to be nobody. I'm going to be nothing. Right. And, you know, I relate to this very well when I tell people when I was probably about 9 or 10 years old, I remember talking to my mother about one day, Mom, I'm going to get married and I'm going to live in a house like across the street from you. And I'm going to raise my family. Right. And every Friday night I'll come to dinner with my family. And every Sunday you're going to come to brunch. And that's how my mother was brought up. And so she was like so excited, you know, her daughter, she knew her boys would move away, but her daughter's going to stay close. And once I went away to school, I never came back home. And I never lived in the same city with her from the time I was 18 on. And when my mother was ill and dying, we had this conversation about, you know, honey, you never moved across the street from me. You didn't have Friday night dinners with me. And it was like, but we all evolved. We all got through
Right.
it. We did other things that created
Right.
our journey. But I found that, right around the age of 50, I said, I can't do this anymore. I got to find out what makes me tick.
Yeah. What you're all about. I mean, here's
Right.
the thing, right? So our stories are indeed so, so, so similar. I grew up learning from my parents who learned from her parents, et cetera, et cetera. And all I ever wanted was to get married, have my house, have my babies, have my dog. I just wanted that perfect Midwest life, right? Like
Right.
I'm from the Midwest as well. And that was what I just wanted. My parents have been married 56 years happily. My grandparents were married 68 years. And so I went after that life and I do whatever I say I'm going to do. So I got married at 22, tall, dark, handsome lawyer, which was great for my Jewish parents, like, and we had the big house in the burbs. By the time I was 24, we had a golden retriever. We made Thanksgiving dinner. It looked perfect. But inside, I felt empty. It was like this ache inside of me, and I would cry all the time. And he was like, "What's wrong with you?" I'm like, "I'm not happy, but how could I not be happy? I had everything that I ever wanted, exactly what you're saying too. I had everything I ever wanted and more. But what was missing was me because what I thought I wanted when I was growing up, I didn't know who I was. And I just followed what Ladies Home Journal or Cosmopolitan Magazine or fill in the blank magazine told me I was supposed to have. And so, like you, it was later when I had really like an existential crisis. I mean, for me, we got divorced at 26 and we can talk about divorce some other time, but I got divorced at 26 and said, well, if that didn't make me happy, what would? And what kept coming to me is I'm here for something. Like there's a reason that I was born. And that's not a conversation that most people have. That's not
Right.
like, hey, how are the, football team doing or whatever? Like, what's the weather? Like, this is like a deep. And so I had to find my people who could have that kind of conversation. And it would plague me to figure out why am I here? And shortly after my divorce, I started volunteering with high school girls. And I felt so lit up. I had this ability to see each one of them for who she really was and what her whole, like, I could be like, Carin, you are so creative and everyone comes to you for making posters. And it was like these girls were seen for the first time rather than what their parents told them to
Right.
do. I was actually seen, right? And then at the same time, I started communicating online with other divorced women because I was 26, 28. All my friends were getting married, not getting divorced.
Right.
And they made me the leader of this like divorced and under 30 group. So my whole life became this like cheerleading, we can do it. And empowerment. And I was like, oh my God, I felt so alive. My blood was juiced. It was like, I've never been happier than when I was supporting these girls and these women and all around purpose. And I'm like, what is this? And I went, oh, this is purpose, right? Like this is the feeling that I'm going for. But I couldn't figure out how to turn that into a career, right? Like I'm sure you and your listeners have this, maybe you've had this experience where you have a sense of what you want to do, but like, how do you actually do that? How do you write the book or
Exactly.
get it published or get your online bakery set up? Like, how do you actually do the thing that's in your heart to do? And I was so afraid of rejection, right? Like I had old perfectionist
Well,
tendency,
yep.
right? That I just gave up. I had one book published, one agent, a book agent in LA read a book I had started to write about young divorce. And he was like, you're a great writer, but I can't publish this. Like he just thought it wasn't. And instead of saying, that's cool, I'll find somebody else, I just gave up. And I went back to another job in corporate. I found another guy that was just like my husband, another lawyer, another BMW. It was like trying to, until we went ring shopping and I was ready to throw up. And I went home and we broke up. And so it was like I ended up severely depressed. So depressed, I was asking my psychiatrist in Cleveland, by the way, every single week for more and more medication. Until one day she said to me, Carin, you don't need more meds. You have dreams that you want to follow and you haven't pursued them.
What a great doctor, because
Right.
most doctors aren't going to give you what I call a coaching answer.
Right. Right. Most I mean, that's what you might go to for definitely a coach, maybe a therapist, but a psychiatrist said, and there's nothing wrong with meds. I still take meds. I have anxiety, like all of that. But she was like, we don't need to keep upping this prescription every single month.
Right.
And she was amazing. And so I started pursuing dreams. Like I had never gone abroad in college, even though I wanted to, but I was basically married to my first husband. So I said to my boss, I need a mental health break. I'm going to go to Paris for a month. And I was scared out of my mind to say
Yeah,
this,
I'm sure.
but I had some savings. And so I'm like, I'm going to take it unpaid. I could come back or not. And he's like, bye, have a good time. I ran a marathon, like all that kind of stuff. So I was like working my way up to finally pursue this purpose of empowering people to live their purpose, but I was too scared to do it. And then one day I was walking home from my, it was in Shaker Square, and walking home from a bad blind date. And I went to open the condo door, and a man, I felt like hot breath on my neck, and I turned around and I was nose to nose with a young man. And he looked at me in the eyes, and then he looked down at my stomach and he pulled a gun. And I screamed and I fell to the ground, and I'm going, please don't hurt me. Please don't hurt me. And now I look up and the gun is pointed at my left temple. And I had this moment. I don't know if you've ever had this, Carin, where it's like, you think that you're about to die. And I thought of different moments in my life, and I said, okay, God, it's been a good life. Tell my parents, thank you. And then some other voice spoke up and was like, oh no, you were put on this earth for purpose and people need you. So I made myself a promise in that moment. If I live, I promise I will pursue my purpose no matter what. And just at that moment, the man took my purse and he ran.
Wow.
So it's like I had to go through tragedy. And what I decided after that, I still didn't know, well, how do you, people would say to me before that, you want to be the Jewish Oprah? I'm like, that is so true. Like, don't we all a little bit want to be Oprah, right?
Right,
Like,
of course.
Of course, you get a car, you get a car. But like, this is before there were podcasts. This is before there was Facebook Lives. This is before YouTube. This is like, never heard of coaching. The only motivational speaker I knew was Tony Robbins. Like it was too hard,
Right.
So, but almost dying gave me life, which we know from the research is a thing. And we know that is often a motivator, as you started off the episode saying, right? And so I still didn't know how, but once I decided, then I realized any path will get me there. So I started applying to schools. Actually, first I started applying to creative writing schools because I wanted to write, and I got rejected from every single one. Then I found positive psychology, which is a scientific study of human flourishing and happiness. And they had a master's degree, and I applied and I got in, and I left my 6-figure job as a vice president of marketing in Northeast Ohio and moved across the country. And I was 36. I started life over again. And my dad said to me, that is the stupidest decision I've ever heard. And it turned out to be the best decision of my life. And then it's just been the whole way, like just live with no regrets and take one step after another.
Well, it's interesting because, again, for most of my life, and I would say up to my 50s, I still was that people pleaser trying to do everything that I needed to do. And my first husband did not appreciate that. My second husband is constantly saying to me, and we've been married 38 years. He's constantly saying to me, stop. What did you do for yourself today? And, I've learned in the last 10 to 15 years, you know what? I can people please, but I'm better pleasing others when I'm happy.
That's right. That's right.
And I didn't know how to find that happiness. My older brother one day just got on my case, and he said, every time I talk to you, it's a pity party. He said, I'm going to give you a list of the things you've accomplished. And I thought, really? Like, how well do you know me? You live on the West Coast. I'm here in the Midwest. We haven't seen each other in a couple of years. But he sent me this list. And I looked at it and was like, wow, you really do know me.
Wow.
And that's when I finally said, okay, I'm getting depressed. I don't want to be depressed. So I'm going to have to take the steps because nobody else can do it for me.
Right.
And that's what you saw lying on the ground there.
Absolutely.
It's like, nobody's going to save me other than me.
That's right. 100%. Right. And it was like in that moment, I wasn't in charge of if I lived or if I died.
Right.
Somebody else was. But once I got the chance, a second chance, then, all right, let's go do this thing. Right. And it is way scarier to live making yourself happy first. Right. So this people pleasing, so one of, my absolute passion is women's happiness. And one of the things, if not the main thing that I believe is keeping women from being our happiest self is people pleasing. No, there's a reason that we people please. Evolutionarily, we are designed to be able to nurture others.
Right.
Right. It's like that keeps the village going. It keeps kids being able to grow and healthy. But it also allowed a woman to be more marriable. I don't know if you know this, but back in the day when women were married off, right, there were dowries and all of that. If a woman was quiet, if she didn't have her own opinion, she was marriable. And so this is like, even if it was 6 generations ago, it still was passed on from generation to generation. And so now we're craving and needing a whole new way. It's very cliche to say, put your own mask on first, right? And we know that. But like you said, I find that most women, most of us don't even know what makes us happy. And we have to go back to basics. I actually call it your joy juice. And I encourage all my clients to make a list and start with just like, what songs make you want to bop, in the car, or what foods do you really love? One of my clients shared, when she's around other people, she wouldn't even tell them how she wanted her coffee made.
Interesting.
Because she didn't want to be a bother. So this is what we've really learned. And so I said to her, well, how do you like your coffee? Because from now on, right, we're only saying that. And so it's like getting back to basics and doing research of what do I enjoy? What does bring me pleasure? And I often find, so one of my theories about women's depression, and by the way, women are twice as many women are depressed as men. And there was a research study actually done at the University of Pennsylvania that, and it's about 10 years old at this point, but at that time, women were less happy than women were 30 years ago. And that research hasn't been updated, but it's interesting that not only are women more depressed, but our happiness is declining. And why that's interesting is because even if you aren't clinically depressed, chances are your happiness has been declining. And so we have more opportunity, but we have more opportunity, but we haven't really lessened the responsibilities. And so we're trying to be perfect at 16 different things at once, and it's not working. And the main thing that I find is in all that pleasing and trying to do everything perfectly, we have no idea who we really are. And we have pushed it down. So I think of the word depression. I'm not a clinical psychologist, not a doctor, right? But depression, we're pressing down.
Yep, absolutely.
Our truth, pressing down the things that light us up. Because when I look back, like at my own life, I was always actually a cheerleader. I was a cheerleader in high school. I couldn't do a cartwheel or splits, but I was like the main cheerleader. I was captain MVP 2 years in a row. But then I didn't make the varsity squad because I couldn't do a cartwheel. So I pushed down. I was told you're not good at this thing that actually is my core strength.
Right.
It's just a different kind of cheerleader. Or, when I thought I wasn't as smart as this person in my class, or I wasn't as cute as that girl in class, and all the ways that we push down. One of my clients, she was so unicorny when she was young. She was all glittery and starry and big dreamy. And her mom was like, enough. There's too much. Or another one of my clients, she came home from 6th grade with art in her hand. And she was like, her teacher told her, you have real potential. And her mom wouldn't hang it on the refrigerator. And I don't blame her mom. She might have been busy that day. Who knows what, right? I mean, I'm a mom. It's
right.
But these things stick in us. And so it just pressed down her truth that she's an artist. Right. Or like my other client who's unicorny, she pressed it down and then became a paralegal. And nothing's wrong with being a paralegal, but her unicorniness was not honored.
Exactly. It's interesting that one of the things that you do with your clients is you ask them to dig deep and, what is your favorite music and what is your favorite food? That's what really pushed me out of corporate America, because every Friday in my management team, we'd go around the room and it was, what's your favorite movie? And in my mind, I knew what it was, but either I just couldn't get the name of it out, or something was holding me back. And finally, my manager called me into her office one day and she said, Carin, you are excellent at everything you do, but our Friday morning meetings, you just don't belong with us. And I looked at her and I said, well, why? And she said, do you know you can't come up with your favorite food? You can't come up with your favorite book. And she went through all these things. What's your favorite color? What was your favorite birthday present? And every time we'd be like, skip me. And I looked at her and I started crying. And I said, my life, I don't think about those things. I think about my boys. I think about my husband. I think about my mother. I think about my job, which I was putting in 60 to 70 hours a week because I loved the job, but hated the culture. And I realized the Friday morning meetings depressed me. So when you talk about being pushed down, that's how I felt. I felt like as everybody said something, I was sinking lower and lower into my chair.
Yeah.
And that afternoon, I went to her and I said, I think I need to take a leave of absence.
Wow.
And she looked at me and she said, oh, no, I didn't mean to upset you that way. And I said, no, something is wrong.
Wow.
And I went home and I talked it over with my son and my husband, and they both looked at me and said, do what you got to do.
Yeah.
But what was bothering me was I was the main breadwinner. My husband had a great job, but I made almost twice what he was making.
Right.
And my thought was, now what?
Right.
And he said to me, it's not going to be easy, but we'll figure it out. And within 30 days, I was gone. And for that first month after that, I was depressed because I wasn't doing anything.
Right.
And then I finally woke up one day and I said, I'm going to go see a doctor. Number one, I want to make sure physically I'm healthy. That's not depressing me.
Right.
And once I figure that out, then I'm going to get some psychological help.
Yeah.
And my mother and my friends just looked at me and said, Carin, you don't need that. You're fine.
Right.
And it was like, no.
Well, this is the society that we've grown up in, right? Like the society of fine, as if fine is okay, right? I give a lot of talks, right, at corporations, whether it's Progressive Insurance or Cleveland Clinic or Amazon. And I often ask, what do you want for your kids? And everybody says to be happy, right? So I'm like, all right, so what's the most asked question in the world? Which it's how are you? Like the most asked question that no matter what the culture, people ask, how are you? And what do we all answer?
Fine.
Yeah. Okay. So like on a scale of -10 to +10, like where's fine? Like a 0 or a +2? Like how many of us want our kids living at a +2? We want our kids to be happy to live at a +8, but nobody's teaching us how. Instead, what we're teaching kids and what we were taught is good skills, math, science, right? But how to follow the standard, like what you're supposed to do. We're taking away art and all the things that, that many people really need or makes them feel good. And we're not spending time saying, this is who you really are. And this is what you're really like excitable at. So one of my coaching clients, when she was a little girl, she was like, would do cartwheels and dance. And she's from an Indian culture. And I met her many years later. I was living in New York City after I left Cleveland and went to get my master's degree, and then started coaching and speaking and, really being the world's expert on women's happiness. And I went into my pharmacy at the Kmart, and one day my pharmacist pulled me into the back and she's like, you're a life coach, right? And I said, yeah. She started crying. Well, she hired me. And I couldn't say to her, well, who are you? What do you love? She didn't know. Like, I can't ask somebody, what's your favorite ice cream? If you're in a place where you have pushed who you are down you've self-sacrificed in order to take care of everybody else, then we're like a deer in headlights. We can't answer those questions. Like that question, what would you do if you didn't have to make money? Oh, I don't know. Like, so those are not the questions that I ask clients. It's more of like a deep way of like unearthing and going through process where we like dive into joy and we dive into hope and we dive into various different ways. I give them different assessments to help them know what their personal strengths are, like, so that we can start getting into it without the brain, but more in the heart and the soul.
Right.
And so as she and I started diving in, she had this like memory. She said, well, when I was a little girl, I loved doing these cartwheels and dancing, but my parents were first generation Americans. And the American dream was that I would just study really hard and I would like get one of these kinds of professions. And so her dad told her, no more dancing. he actually told her he wanted a boy. So she was like, no more dancing. And she wasn't allowed. And so she became a pharmacist. And there's nothing wrong with being a pharmacist. Like for some people,
Right.
that's their absolute passion in the healing arts. But here, if she was super colorful and dancing in like these Indian saris, there's nothing less colorful than being a pharmacist because
Oh,
you're in the
absolutely.
white coat, you're counting pills. And so as we started to relate, okay, well, what could you do now that's like that, you know? And so we started playing with it. And first it was like, what could you do in your life? Are there ways that you could dance now? Are there ways you could do gymnastics? And then like, well, what's something that you've like thought, oh, I would love to do that, but I can't because da da da. She's like, well, I would love to model, but I can't because da da. I'm like, well, how do you know? She was a gorgeous woman. And she ended up getting a modeling contract and became the billboard for a cosmetics company in India.
How
So it's like
wonderful.
and now she doesn't do that full time. Now she's actually working in the environment, which just lights her up and makes her excited. So it's like, we have to get into, and there's layers, and a lot of the layers are learning to like work with our nervous system.
Right. Exactly.
To no longer just be the pleaser, and that it's okay to tell somebody how you like your coffee or right. And in that moment for you, Carin, what struck me is if you can't answer those questions or you have it in the tip of your tongue, but you're not saying it, then perhaps you learned your whole life that your opinion didn't matter.
Well, and it's interesting that you say that because that's how I felt
Right.
growing up.
Right.
I have two older brothers. My middle brother was always the light of the party, and I love him to death. Okay. So I was never what I would call jealous of him. In fact, I was in awe of him. And it wasn't until we became adults and all of us had gone through divorces and whatever that I was with both my brothers visiting my parents. And I found that they were listening to me. And I felt like, this is weird. Like I'm the baby sister. You've never listened to me before, but I didn't take it anywhere. When my mother got ill and I chose to move in with her to spend her last couple of weeks with her, my brother was there too. And my brother had a very close relationship with my mother. And I just assumed he was going to do everything and I was going to be sitting on the sidelines, just being there. And it turned out that he was leaning on me and asking me things. And I was able to take care of my mother. And, you know, that was just about 6 years ago. And I had been growing and evolving. But that's where I can see the big change in me, because no, I'm no longer the baby sister.
Yes.
I have value.
Yes.
And
say it, sister.
And if somebody doesn't see that, now it's their issue. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
And I don't put myself in situations anymore where I allow people to devalue me. And
that's huge.
That's one of the reasons I started this particular podcast, because I realized as we tell our stories, everybody is sitting out there, and those who are listening are going, like when I read your bio, I didn't have that exact experience, but I had this. Look how much I am like Purpose Girl.
Right.
Look what she has done. Can I do that? Well, maybe I don't want to do all that, but what is it I want to do? And then it's
not doing the same. Exactly. It's not doing the same thing as somebody else. It's the spirit of it, right? The feeling of it. You know, when someone comes to me in my classes or in, you know, coaching, whatever it might be, the first question I actually ask is, how do you want to feel? Because we don't know what we want to do.
Right.
Or we have squashed down, pressed down what we want to do or any of that. But if we start with how we want to feel, I want to feel excited. I want to feel at peace. Now we can like elongate that and it lets us kind of in, right? But it's so you and I really are the same. I'm the baby sister also, the youngest of three also. And one of a turning point moment for me, from what I remember and understand, I was really a ham growing up. Like my role in the family was to be the happy one and the fun, which is not a surprise when you see my hands flailing. I'm like, I am back to my original self. But I grew up in a very loud, opinionated family. We had family dinner every night, and it's so loud that my brother is now a um, pretty famous criminal defense attorney in the state of Michigan. Like,
Okay.
and so and he basically always was from the time I was a little girl. And I remember one night we were like, he and my dad were talking at dinner, which is what normally happened. And I turned to him and I said, I want to talk. I want to talk. And he whipped his head at me and he looks me up and down. So talk. And then I had nothing to say. And it's just like that moment in the boardroom for you, right? Like, I don't know what my favorite pizza is, right? Not to mention, we don't have to have a favorite of everything. We just have to know all the things that juice us up, and you get to have all the things, right? Like, I'm a big fan of all the things. So I really shut down. And I used to be around my family then, and like, I could be like hammy, but I would not share my opinion. I wouldn't share. And I thought I just don't have as much to say. And so like all of that. And what's funny now is look at what I do now, right? Like I speak to 1,000 people on a stage at Amazon or here on a podcast and all of that because I actually did have something to say. And what I had to do was to be able to identify that and like to heal that old story within me, and then to really own that I matter and I have something to say. And so one of the things that we do in all my classes is I teach, like I have a class right now called Goddess on Purpose. There's 35 women in it. And a woman, when she raises her hand or whatever on Zoom, she'll be like, I have something to say. And we will all say it, sister. Because how many places are there in the world where we've been told not to speak?
Right.
And we see that story played out. And this is where, a big thing that I teach is pain to purpose. And often the thing that has plagued us the most, right? Like you thought you didn't matter, but look at you now. Look at how you are. You thought your voice didn't matter, just like me. And now you have podcasts. And it's like all of this. So it's like the very thing that plagued us or was the hardest for us often is really the seat of our purpose and what we're really here for. It's what we're really here to heal or to shift in others or to create or to build. And there's this opportunity, right? Like one of my clients, her husband, and I can share this because she has her own podcast. She talks about it, but her husband was a sex addict and she only found out because he was arrested and she got the call, right? And so she now supports women who have been have betrayal trauma. And it's like incredible to witness her. And another one of my clients is in one of my classes. She loved an addict and she tried to like heal him and she couldn't. And so she wrote this book called Loving You is Killing Me. And so often it's not that we're only our pain story, but that I see it over and over again, that can become the seat of, it's one of the avenues. There are many avenues to purpose, but that's one of the avenues to purpose. And where people get kind of off about purpose is thinking it has to be like, is it to be a writer? Is it to be a speaker? Is it to be and it's like, I teach that purpose is not a noun. I call it the theory of the nouns. Your purpose is not a noun. It's not like to be a mom or to be a dad or to be an architect. It's a verb or a series of verbs to create, to build, to inspire. And then we do it in all these different roles and nouns.
And again, as I'm listening to you, my parents always, for the most part, were very positive people. Okay. Didn't say that we weren't adequate in any way. But also growing up in a Jewish family, my parents had certain ideals. My brothers definitely were going to go to college. I probably should go to college. I should get a teaching degree. And all these things, this is how it's going to work out. And in my teens, I really thought I wanted to be a speaker. I wanted to be a writer. I kept thinking I'm going to go into communications when I go to college. And I had to write a paper. And my father was a prolific writer. And so are my brothers. And so I wrote this paper and I asked him to review it with me. And I didn't ask him to criticize me. I said, I want you to review it with me so I can see where I can make any adjustments. And he read it and he goes, Carin, you should leave the writing to your brothers and I. And
Sister.
and
Oh,
I
this
don't
one
and I
hurts me.
yeah,
Ay, 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 ay,
and I
ay.
don't think he meant to be mean, but he knew what he could do. He knew what my brothers could do. He didn't know how to help me do something better.
Mm.
And so, going into college, I just like struggled with my writing.
My heart
But
hurts so much.
yeah, but I started writing again
Mm,
about probably about a little over 20 years ago.
mm,
My youngest son is on the autism spectrum. He's at the high end of it. And people just didn't want to believe that he was on the spectrum.
mm,
And it's not so much that we wanted to prove that he was, but we wanted the acceptance because as he was growing up and hormonal changes, he wasn't the most pleasant person to be around.
mm,
So I started writing about this,
mm.
and I started getting people contacting me and saying, can you write a blog for my magazine? Can you write this? Can you write that? And I was, but not under my name, because I thought, well, if my family sees it, they're not going to like it.
Oh.
But my oldest brother, somebody showed him something that I had written on a family adjusting to autism. And he called me up and he goes, when did you learn how to write? And my name wasn't on it. And I said, well, what are you talking about?
Mm.
And he tells me the article. And I said, Dad had his reasons for saying what he said to me that day. My dad could not teach me how to write, could not tell me what was good or what was bad. And that was my cue. Stay away from Dad for writing. And
Mm.
if and when you're ready, you'll know. And my whole family, that's when I really think my brothers started looking at me differently. It was like, yeah, look at what she can
Mm.
do.
Mm.
But a lot of us culturally, that's how we grow up.
Absolutely. And it could take one well-meaning comment or not well-meaning or whatever it might be. And then we just squash it down. Right.
Yeah.
We just think, oh, well, there goes that dream. I can't do that. And I've seen it in my own life. I've seen it in others' lives. And so then what starts to happen is our reptilian brain, our fear brain, right? It's like we all have our heart and soul. It's like, oh, that's who I am. That's what I want to do. And because our brain is a survival mechanism, our brain is constantly looking out for threat, right? Like what's
Right.
going to go wrong, because our ancestors thousands of years ago had to know, like, are those berries? Can we eat them? Or is there going to be a rainy season? Do we have enough food to eat? So our brains are constantly looking for the threat. And so one comment like that can really shut us down.
Absolutely.
And, I work with more women than men. I have worked with men, but I tend to find, and it's proven in the research, that women get shut down more from this. Women have 50% less confidence than men. Studies have shown that in a number of different industries, women are just as competent, but less confident. And some of that is born and bred. I mean, from the time that we're little girls, we're taught that our bodies are not okay, that we're going to have to wear makeup. We're going to have, in order to be loved, one day we're going to have to dye our hair. We're going to have to do all these things. We're going to have to lose weight, whatever it might be. And so we start really learning that who we are is not okay. And so one comment can really do that. And the opportunity here is to like uncover those layers. And I love the kind of compassion you have for your dad. One of the things I actually teach is like, it's okay also if you have some anger. Like
Oh, absolutely.
you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like we want to get to the point of compassion, but if somebody's like, my second grade teacher told me I couldn't write or whatever it is, like I actually teach my clients how to have anger because we've repressed anger too. And so I'll turn on like an angry song and we'll just like, we'll hit pillows and because then you have more space for the compassion and the, what do I want to do about it? The last piece then is we want to really put our mindset. I have a big phrase, which is do the damn thing, because our mind will tell us all the reasons that we can't do the ideas and the dreams
Oh,
that we
absolutely.
want to do.
Yep.
Right. And our job is every time you hear yourself say, I can't, is to keep asking yourself, how can I? What is possible? Right. And we're not saying it's going to be easy. Right. I don't know about you, Carin, but it's not like this path has been easy.
I mean, and what is easy today
Mm.
may be more difficult tomorrow.
Right.
One of my clients who does a podcast with us, she's a personal coach. And for the last 4 years, I've played, as we call, the guinea pig on her podcast. And I've opened up and I've said, I wear my heart out openly. I'm not afraid to tell people. But we were talking about something the other day, and she said, I am a coach. I've been doing it for years. She said, but I am so impressed with how vulnerable you'll get. And I said, the more vulnerable I am, the more honest I am with myself. And then I can deal with the shit that life hands me. And she goes, you know what? She said, I'm going to start talking to a friend of mine who's a coach, because maybe I've been doing more coaching than listening to myself. And that made me feel so good, because we all need that assistance.
Yes. Yeah. It's so interesting, because of how I grew up. Sounds like how you grew up. Like, I really had this perfectionist thing. And that if I'm not perfect, nobody will love me. If I'm not, all these things. And so when I finally went back to grad school and was like, okay, I'm going to go for it, a friend of mine was helping me figure out like what my signature talk was. And she said, well, what's different about you? And I said, well, I have my master's degree in the science of happiness from an Ivy League university. And she was like, no, what's different about you? I'm like, no, you don't understand. There's only 250 of us in the world with this degree, and it's from an Ivy League. And she was like, no, what else? And she asked me that question about 10 times until I broke down crying. She said to me, Carin, what's different about you is that you have been beaten down. You have done like all these different things, the gun robbery, this, that, and you keep coming back and you keep being resilient. And like, you need to share. You had depression. I said, oh, I can't tell people I had depression. She's like, you live with anxiety. I can't tell people I have anxiety. Like, who has to hire a happiness coach that has anxiety? She's like, I do. Because you're real, you get it. And so she really helped me. And I was terrified. And I still get terrified. Brene Brown calls it a vulnerability hangover,
Right.
when we share something. And it was just Mental Health Awareness Month in May. And so on the last day I posted, hey, if you have anxiety or depression, you're not alone. I do too.
Absolutely.
And I was like terrified to share that, right? I did a whole episode about it. But I believe that is really how we help people the most, is we normalize it. And, I had an experience. I am remarried, and we didn't get married until I was almost 40. And I wasn't even sure I wanted my own kids. I just wanted a million women to say I changed their life, like back to the Oprah dream, so I didn't,
right.
But we were on our honeymoon in Italy. We had some wine, we had some good calamari, and I was like, oh, why not? Let's try. And the very first time we got pregnant. And first I was freaked out, and then I was overjoyed. And then we lost that baby.
Oh.
And that miscarriage showed me I really wanted to be a mom. But I thought, I'm going to get pregnant so easily. I got pregnant so easily the first time. It's a huge, long story. Somebody could hear it on my own podcast, but it took me years and a couple of different fertility doctors, and finally using an egg donor at 44. But I had a second miscarriage at 43. And that one, by then I already was on Sirius XM radio on one of their shows. They called me the happiness guru. So I had, I was able to live my purpose. I had a bunch of clients. I had all of that. And so when I had a miscarriage at 43, I was like, I don't want to live anymore. I mean, here I am, a happiness coach, and I didn't want to live anymore. And so I had to use all of my tools, right? The mindset, the self-compassion, the anger, the crying, the meditation, the leaning into community and sisterhood, purpose, like all of it. And so one day in meditation, I was like, okay, show me what else I'm here to birth. Oh, let me back up. The first thing I did is I posted about my miscarriage and how many people suffer in silence. And I'm telling you, Carin, I got, I think, 70 private messages from women who had suffered in silence. And some men too, who said that their partner had or whatever. And so the more vulnerable we are, the more we really can be on purpose and really help people. And it's scary at first, but then it feels really, really good, because even at just one person, you're making a difference in that vulnerability, like the story you shared. And so when I went through the second one, I was so depressed. And I said, show me what else I'm here to birth. And I saw this image of a globe and women all throughout the globe gathering in circles, because I feel like, my sisterhood, like friends were helping me so much
Right.
then. And I was like, oh, okay, I know what I have to do. And I created Women's Happiness Day, which is one day I invented a holiday. It's one day a year, October 18th, for women to come together and learn happiness tools. And the first time I did it, I had 99 events in more than 20 countries on 6 continents, like from Abuja, Nigeria to Jerusalem to Portland, Oregon, and Cleveland, Ohio. And it was like so incredible. We can really, our vulnerability is what is who we are.
Oh, absolutely. And, I think why so many of us have not allowed ourselves to become vulnerable. My mother used to say, don't hang out your dirty laundry for your neighbors to see.
Right.
And,
Absolutely.
And so when I would come home and say things like, I feel like I'm being bullied in school, she'd say, well, tomorrow you go in with a big smile, like nothing, because she didn't know the
Hide
answers.
it, push it down,
Yeah,
put it up.
exactly.
Be fine, be okay, be happy.
Exactly. And, it was as I got older, as I started having my children, seeing what they were going through, I never downplayed it. It was like, well, tell me how it happened. Okay. You don't have to give me the other person's name if you don't want to, but tell me how it happened. How were you feeling at the time? What was your reaction? And that started helping me. And so when I decided to start podcasting 10 years ago, it was like, you know what? If only one person is listening and I can make a difference. Wow. I mean, there's my purpose. But yet I don't put myself up there saying, oh, I'm going to make a difference. I don't know. It depends how you accept the information from me. So one of the things I just did, and I launched it yesterday, was that for the last year on Avoid the Maze, I have spoken to, I think, 100+ coaches. And I believe in coaching more than I believe in psychological therapy or psychiatric therapy. And the reason being is when you're coaching, I really do believe that you're more authentic. Because I would sit in a therapist chair and just say, oh, I can't do that. Oh, my husband won't let me do that. Somebody won't let me do it. The universe won't. But since I've been working with coaches, it's like, let me try that. And so I created a name for myself, and I am now the coach advocate. And I am asking my listeners that if you need a connection with a coach, number one, you can go back and listen to Avoid the Maze, but I'm now keeping a database of all of you, and I'm going to start referring people to the coaches that will best suit them. Now I'm going to tell them, I'm going to give you 2 or 3 names. You can reach out, you can do the research. If this doesn't work for you, fine, come back to me, because I have 100 now. Hopefully in a year, I'll have
1,000.
Yeah.
Yes.
And to me, that's helping me heal and to realize that, like you said in the beginning, being happy does not mean that we are smiling all day long and, not getting aggravated when somebody cuts in front of us in traffic, or our kid calls from a new job that he started 6 hours away telling you how lonely he is. It's like, okay, yeah, that's real. I can handle that.
Yeah, it's so interesting, because positive psychology in my field gets kind of dinged as like happyology, and the key is struggling well, right? Like, we're all going to have hard things happen. We all have lived through COVID and lost people or been sick ourselves, or the loneliness and isolation that's come from it. Like, we all have had this experience.
Right.
And many others. For me, it was miscarriage, fertility, gun robbery, divorce, more that we haven't even gotten into, right? Like, my first love abused me at 17, like all of that. And it's having the tools to bounce back from that. And one of the things that I love about purpose I mean, sometimes clients work with me. It's not even about purpose. It's just like becoming strong and vibrant and like, it's like being alive. And part of aliveness is we're going to have the difficulty. And that's just part of life. And we can't, I love what your mom said. We all grew up in that culture, but if you sweep shit under the rug long enough, eventually it's going to start to stink. Like we have to actually, right? And so there's this opportunity for all of us to not just survive, but to thrive. And, as cliche as that sounds, but to really live and to look at any challenging situation and what can I learn here? And it's like, what I love about your idea, I love it for a million reasons, but I think people have a hard time knowing who are the coaches, who do I go to? Does anyone know anyone? And like you being a solid, stable, credible reference is incredible. It's a great service to both end users and to coaches. And it's using all of your skills and talents, right? Like, so when I do work with someone on getting clear on what their purpose is, yes, we got to like clear the muck of kind of what's happened to them, get into what their joy is, what they really love, what inspires them and what their passion is. And a lot of people still then don't know. And so what I do is we start taking like, what are your core skills and talents, which is what are your core passions? What are your strengths? What did you love as a child? Like all these different ways in what wisdom have you learned from all of the pain in your life? And like, we put it almost into a blender.
Yep.
And this is the thing, you couldn't have been a child and said, well, I'm going to create a podcast that brings on coaches and teach it. Like you wouldn't have known.
No, absolutely.
So we can't plan ahead, but you can now take everything that like excites you and juices you up and you can create something out of it. And that's the name of the game. Like there were no computers 50 years ago, 60, whatever it is, but somebody created it and we're creating these things now. And that's the magic.
Well, I have so enjoyed having you on as a guest. We're going to have you back because I think the talk about divorce is so relevant today. And especially coming through the pandemic. I am finding too many people that I know who have ended their marriages because 2 years being stuck in the house with each other. They weren't prepared for it. And for the most part, they weren't prepared for their own feelings coming out. So I look forward to that. And I will send Cleveland your regards today.
Please do.
I will.
Please do. Thank you so much. It was wonderful to be with you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.